Hello and welcome to Corbett's Comments. God's Word is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. I'm Pastor Otis Corbett, and I invite you to explore a portion of the Bible with me today. Specifically, I want to share a word about controlling creation on the road to the cross as a comment on passages from Luke 5, Matthew 8, and Matthew 14. Let's begin by reading Luke 5, 1 through 11. On one occasion, while the crowd was pressing in on him to hear the word of God, he was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, and he saw two boats by the lake, but the fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. Getting into one of the boats, which was Simon's, he asked him to put out a little from the land, and he sat down and taught the people from the boat. And when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." And Simon answered, "Master, we toiled all night and took nothing, but at your word I will let down the nets." And when they had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish, and their nets were breaking. They signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so that they began to sink. But when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." For he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish that they had taken, and so also were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid. From now on you will be catching men." And when they had brought their boats to land, they left everything and followed him. So today we will go sailing. We're going to spend some time in boats today, and small boats at that. Now, as with many subjects, boats can cause people to have some strong emotions. For example, there was a man who put an ad in an online dating site to find a new girlfriend. The ad said, "Looking for adventurous, outdoors-oriented lady with boat and motor. Send photo of boat and motor." Of course, from the opposite perspective, one wife's definition of a boat is this: it is a hole in the water into which you pour money. Again, boats are expensive. All joking aside, however, one emotion that boats can cause is fear. That fear is not caused by the boat itself, but from the way sailing is so dominated by the weather. Even a minor storm can seem big in a small boat, and even the biggest ships are vulnerable to the overwhelming forces of nature. When the Great Lakes ore carrier Edmund Fitzgerald was launched in 1958, it was the largest ship on the Great Lakes, and it remained so until 1971. She weighed 13,602 tons empty and was 729 feet long. She was called the Big Fitz for a reason, and frankly, she would have been a big ship anywhere, much less on the Great Lakes. She regularly carried twice her own weight of iron ore to steel mills in the United States. She was so big and so powerful that she often seemed to shrug off the forces of nature. That is until November 1975. On the 9th day of that month, while bound for Detroit with 26,000 tons of iron ore, Edmund Fitzgerald was overcome by a winter storm. So the Big Fitz was overcome by the weather. It disappeared with the loss of all 29 of its crew members. Now, if anyone else has doubts about the power of nature, here's another example. They need to go to the Mississippi Gulf Coast, because at the seafront there they have a pole on which they've marked the height of the storm surge of all the many hurricanes that have come ashore at that point. Now, I had always heard about Hurricane Camille. And when I saw this pole, I was disappointed that I couldn't find Hurricane Camille listed on that pole at all. But I was wrong, because up near the very top of this pole, there was a mark about 30 feet in height that showed where the storm surge for Hurricane Camille had crashed ashore there. I remember in a disaster relief ministry event during the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, working in a lady's home where she had a grand piano that had been stuffed out the front door of her house by a wave. The power of nature is almost beyond belief. And it is beyond the power of mere mortals to affect. The weather does what it does. But we will see today that these powers don't compare to the power of Christ. And he demonstrated that he could control creation on the road to the cross. He began by showing that he could control creatures. On the road to the cross, Christ controlled creatures. In our passage from Luke 5, we see that Jesus was able to know something about fish and control fish in ways that fishermen could not do. Now, no one likes it when people butt into their business. There's an old saying that goes, those of you who think they know it all really irritate those of us who do. The truth is, there are people who think they know more than the experts, and just as often, when these folks act on their knowledge, usually disaster strikes. I do remember seeing a billboard from a plumbing company that listed one hourly rate if they called them first, and another hourly rate if the husband of the family had worked on the plumbing before they got there. And of course, that was much higher. There's another example, much more serious than this, when a police department took it upon themselves to install a temporary traffic light at an intersection without consulting traffic engineers. They did not know some factors, and it resulted in a fatal car accident, a car crash, that people were killed. So they thought they knew something they didn't know, and it had bad results. Now, here's the thing. Jesus should not have known about fishing. He was a trained carpenter, he was a religious teacher, but he was not a trained fisherman, and this kind of fishing was not done by just anyone, because these fishermen were highly skilled. They had long training, they had much experience in catching fish. And catching fish with a net isn't easy. It's an industrial process, really, even in those days. Yet, Jesus did know more about these creatures than did these expert fishermen. Why? Well, Jesus could control creatures because he is the creator of them. John 1:1-4 tells us, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Because Jesus is the creator, we need to honor his knowledge. We need to honor his instructions. We need to follow his commands. We have been given the commandment as God's people to have dominion over the world. That was what Adam and Eve were told to do, to have dominion over the world and to be good stewards of it, because that is the commandment of God. We need to be good stewards of this world so that we can enjoy part of the abundant life that Christ promised us. If we're not good stewards, then we'll lose out on those things that God has intended for us to enjoy through creation. So we need to honor the knowledge that Christ had. We need to be good stewards of creation, but at the same time, we don't need to let creation control us. We've been given the commandment to take charge of it, and we need to do that with the full knowledge that we need to be good stewards of it for the cause of Christ and for our own benefit. So we see that Christ, on the road to the cross, controlled creatures. He also controlled storms. On the road to the cross, we see Christ controlling storms. Matthew 8:23-27 says this, "And when he was entered into a ship, his disciples followed him. And behold, there arose a great tempest in the sea, insomuch that the ship was covered with the waves, but he was asleep. And his disciples came to him and awoke him, saying, Lord, save us, we perish. And he saith unto them, Why are ye fearful, O ye of little faith? Then he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. But the men marvel, saying, What manner of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?" In this passage, we find our expert mariners and the supposedly landlubber carpenter on the Sea of Galilee, which was actually a very large lake. It was a lake, not a sea, but that didn't make it any less dangerous. The terrain is such that There is a funnel effect surrounding the lake because of the terrain that causes very strong winds to come up that can create severe storms, like that storm which sank the Edmund Fitzgerald on another large lake. These dangers were real. But although they were real, the Sea of Galilee was, or Lake Gennesaret, using the Jewish name, was a key element in the economy and culture of northern Israel. Without the Sea of Galilee, it just wouldn't have been the same place. You see, the Sea of Galilee was a major transportation route. Not only did people fish it, it was also a way to travel. And Jesus and his disciples sailed upon it on a number of occasions to reach the other side. In this case, he was going over there to have an appointment to meet the Gadarene demoniac. Now, the disciples didn't know that that was going to happen, but that was what God was intending to take place. While on the way, a typical storm of great violence descended upon them, and the disciples who knew the boats and knew the lake were deathly afraid. Now, Jesus, of course, was sleeping. Here's the question of the hour. Do you think Jesus didn't know what was happening? Of course he knew what was happening. He wasn't worried because he was the creator of weather. Now, when he was awakened, he rebuked his disciples for their fear, and then he rebuked the winds and the waves, and calm came over the sea. And the disciples marveled. Have you ever seen a magician, who is actually not a magician, but a sleight of hand artist, do a trick? Maybe it's a card trick, or maybe it's a trick with the balls in the cups on the table, or whatever you want to say. And have you ever seen that and been amazed at what happened? We're also even more amazed when we see how the magician actually uses a trick, a sleight of hand, to create the illusion of magic. In fact, sometimes I think that's even more amazing than the actual trick itself. Now, here's what we see with these disciples. These disciples marveled at what Jesus could do because they didn't know at that point the solution that Jesus had, and that was he was the creator. He was demonstrating that all the time while he was on the earth with his disciples. They didn't see it yet, and they were amazed. And so we see that not only can Jesus control creatures, not only can he control weather, in our next passage we see that Jesus could control physics on the road to the cross. On the road to the cross, Christ controlled physics. So, it's interesting. For experienced fishermen, it seemed like the disciples had a tendency to get caught at sea in severe storms. And the next time this happened, we see it in Matthew 14, 24 through 33, we see that Jesus was able to control physics. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with the waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, It is a spirit, and they cried out for fear. But straightway Jesus spoke unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me to come unto thee on the water. And he said, Come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? And when they were come into the ship, the wind ceased. Then they that were in the ship came and worshipped him, saying, O of a truth, thou art the Son of God. God, through Jesus, his Son, created our world, and he designed it to run in certain ways. He created the laws of biology. He created the laws of chemistry. He created the laws of oceanography. He created the laws of physics. And so our belief as Christians in an intelligent creator prompted us in times past to systematically study nature. Because if there was a design behind the creation, we could discover it and could discover how creation works. Now, even though science now often seems to despise our faith, in truth, modern science came out of Christian faith. God's design was perfect. It was only marred by human sins. Now, what we know as the laws of physics today, they are largely immutable. They can work the same way every time. Very rarely do we observe the laws of physics in a way that they aren't working the way they were designed for. Now, we can use the laws of physics, but we really can't alter them. Only God can do that. And when we use the laws of physics properly, we can do wonderful things like fly an airplane. When you violate the laws of physics, you pay the price. Now, people often perpetuate the myth that the bumblebee, as they fly, violates the law of physics. Well, nothing that flies violates the law of physics. However, if you decide to jump off a roof of a building with an open umbrella, you will violate the laws of physics, and the results will be painful. Now, Jesus showed us in these verses that He is the creator of physics. A man could not walk on water, but Jesus could. And not only could He walk on water, but Jesus could also empower Peter to do so as well. And we see He could control creation because He was the author of creation. And in these examples, we see Jesus controlling creation on the road to the cross in many different ways. He controlled creatures, He controlled weather, He controlled physics. These were historical events, and they did in fact occur. So what does that mean for us today? Well, it means that Christ is in control of everything that can cause us fear. And as we walk on our road today, Christ can help us control our fears. Human sin has marred God's perfect creation, and the world is a dangerous place. This causes people to experience fear. People are often afraid of four-footed creatures, like the young lady who, when she was a child, had been knocked down by a dog who stole her graham cracker. Then years ago, she ran away from a German Shepherd, remembering that fear of dogs. And the German Shepherd didn't hurt her, but her fall and running away did hurt. She hurt herself. People are also afraid of two-footed creatures, like the mother who would always call her daughter when a convict had escaped, or if the local police were looking for a fugitive. Jesus, of course, showed us that He can control creatures. We need to give Him control of our fears about creatures as well. People are often afraid of storms. Storms are violent. They can cause destruction and death. I know a family who once had their home hit by lightning and it caused a fire. They never left their home totally empty again. Somebody was always home in case lightning might strike in the same place twice. Now that can happen, but it doesn't happen that often. And yet they always had somebody at home. Jesus, of course, showed He can control storms, and we need to give Him control of our fears about storms as well. People also have what is called on social media FOMO, or fear of missing out. Like children who don't want to nap or to go to bed at night because they're afraid they're going to miss out on something, we often think that God's way is not the best way. We often find ways around the rules of creation. We try to find pleasure in ways God didn't intend for us to find pleasure. We try to find power in ways that God didn't intend for us to find power. And we often rebel against His plan, and when we do, it costs us. Jesus amply demonstrated His control of creation, and He needs to be in control of our lives as well. We need to seek His abundant life, not our false abundance. In conclusion, Jesus is the Creator. He created nature for our blessing, and He uses everything He created for our good. Romans 8:28 reminds us, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to His purpose. The way we are most blessed is by allowing Him to control our lives. He's called us, but have we answered? Have we yielded our lives to Him today? We see He can control nature, but does He have control of us? Because He is a gentleman. He doesn't take control of us unless we allow Him to. Are we still trying to control our lives today? The answer is, if we are, we're going to be in a mess. But if we surrender to Him, He can control our lives in ways that are superior to anything we can do. Do we have fears? Turn them over to Christ, and He can control them as He controls us. Thanks so much for visiting with me today. I'll be back soon with another word from the Scriptures we can share together. Every blessing. I'm Dr. Otis Corbett.